Have you ever stopped to wonder if the walls closing in around you are real or just something you built yourself? We spend most of our lives operating inside boundaries we assume are fixed. When faced with friction, the default human response is to retreat to comfort, the couch, the snooze button, the path of least resistance. One man chose to stay in the fire. David Goggins does not possess a superhuman genetic code. He was not born with an unbreakable will. He systematically dismantled his own psychological barriers, proving that human capacity is rarely a matter of genetics, but a result of how often you are willing to confront your own reflection. Goggins grew up in the 1980s under the daily threat of a tyrannical father, enduring severe domestic abuse that left him battered and perpetually terrified. When his mother finally managed to escape, they relocated to a small rural town in Indiana. The violence at home was replaced by crushing poverty and virulent racism. Subjecting a developing brain to that level of toxic stress produces clinical consequences. A constant fight-or-flight response stunted his ability to learn, leaving him struggling to read and drowning in social anxiety. By his mid-20s, he had sunk into a deep depression. He weighed nearly 300 pounds, working a dead-end night shift as a cockroach exterminator with zero vision for the future. He had every statistical and psychological justification to fade away. Instead, his shattered foundation provided the exact raw material he needed to start building. The turnaround started in a bathroom. Goggins stood in front of his reflection and engaged in a practice he called the accountability mirror, a brutal, unfiltered audit of his own lies, excuses, and failures. He stopped blaming his abusive father and his racist town. He took radical ownership of his reality, shifting his mindset from a victim surviving trauma to a man weaponizing it. This graph tracks Goggins' body weight over a 3-month period. To qualify for Navy SEAL training, he needed to lose 106 pounds in just 90 days. He executed a plummeting descent that shattered standard physiological expectations. He did not pursue this rapid weight loss for fitness. It was his first tactical strike, proving his body had no choice but to obey the absolute demands of his mind. That obedience would be tested in the ultimate physical proving ground, Navy SEAL Hell Week. Hell Week is engineered to break a human being. Trainees endure 5.5 days of continuous physical torture with fewer than 4 hours of sleep total, spending hours submerged in the freezing Pacific Ocean. Goggins went through this physiological devastation 3 separate times. During one attempt, he ran on fractured feet, literally duct taping his broken bones together just to put his boots on. The physical agony was constant, but the real test was mental. At any moment, a trainee can end their suffering simply by walking over to a brass bell and ringing it. To resist that bell, Goggins developed a practice he called callousing the mind. By intentionally seeking out friction, a person builds psychological scar tissue. Every time he chose the freezing water over a warm blanket, he layered armor over his insecurities. Over time, that mental scar tissue thickens, making the brain unresponsive to signals of panic and exhaustion. He used the torn muscles and broken bones of SEAL training as blunt instruments to permanently rewire his brain's default reaction to adversity. This rewiring process led Goggins to a biological revelation that defines his ultra-endurance feats, the 40% rule. This gauge represents human physical output. When your brain screams that you're exhausted, you've only depleted 40% of your capacity. The brain acts as an evolutionary governor, triggering severe fatigue alarms well before actual failure to protect you from self-destruction. To prove this governor could be bypassed, Goggins entered a 100-mile ultramarathon without a single day of specific running preparation. By mile 70, his body entered a catastrophic cascade. He suffered from severe shin splints, multiple stress fractures, and outright kidney failure as his blood turned toxic. He continued to push into lethal environments, qualifying for the Badwater 135, a continuous foot race through Death Valley. The ambient temperature there sits aggressively above 120 degrees, cooking the asphalt and testing the absolute limits of human survival. You do not cross a finish line under those conditions because of athletic superiority. You survive by manually overriding the mind's biological governor and forcing your legs to move anyway. The miles Goggins runs are a byproduct of a much deeper objective. He is documenting the exact mechanics required to endure, when every biological signal is screaming for a retreat. He looks at the very things that break most people, trauma, fear, and immense suffering, and processes them as the exact raw materials required to forge armor. His existence is a deeply uncomfortable indictment of modern society. He strips away the soft, insulated layers of comfort we surround ourselves with, exposing the self-imposed boundaries we accept every single day. If you want to tap into the remaining 60% of your potential, you have to stop negotiating with your own weakness. Goggins proved that the body has no choice but to follow the instructions of a calloused mind. The only barrier left to break is the one you continue to negotiate with.